Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Tee. I'm Brent Hubbs of Volquest.com with the legendary Carmen Tigano, veteran of college athletics administration, Tennessee historian, college athletics historian, and a man who knows basically everybody around the country in college athletics, I think. We're continuing our look up close at one of the icons in college football and a legend and a good friend of ours, and that is John T. Majors. Carmen, we got a couple of Coach Majors' closest guys with us today to talk about his impact on their lives and his impact on the world of college athletics.
You know, you do these podcasts, and some things are a little difficult, but some things are easy. And I'm very sure that these two young men, not young men, hell, they're old now, have stories and relationships and feelings and passion for John Majors, second to no one we've talked to. We've talked to a lot of folks about Coach Majors, and we're really lucky to have Glenn and David on today because they knew him really well as a person. And that's what we're hoping to convey today.
Yeah, David Moon and Glenn Streno joining us here on the podcast. David, let's start with you a little bit. And Glenn, jump in here too. Simple question. Describe John Majors.
How long is this podcast? First of all, it's really strange calling him John Majors. And I have referred to him as John Majors since he passed, but never to anyone in his family. And I once called him by his first name late in his life, and he and I had a really cool relationship late in his life. And I called him by his first name on purpose, and then he looked at me, and he went from being John Majors to being Coach Majors. And he said, "What did you say?" And I said, "Coach Majors." And, that's what I thought you said. And he didn't mean it in the sense, were you disrespecting me? It was as if he was shocked that I would do that. And I was just playing with him. So to describe him, he's among the most complex people I've ever known. This was a guy who was a strict, he was raised by a football coach whose name was Shirley. Okay, so when you talk about a boy named Sue, imagine being the child of the boy named Sue. And so he grew up in this strict authoritarian world, but yet he was a lover of nature and of museums. When he'd go to cities, new places, he'd go to museums, and he loved the opera. He was politically liberal, but you would have never thought that if you just knew him superficially. And as a coach, the thing that you'll hear said over and over and over again about him is that he was an incredible stickler for detail.
And on top of that, Glenn, he was incredibly competitive in everything, right? Like it was about winning.
No question. When I think of, Coach Majors, he lived and did everything with passion. He was enthusiastic about everything. But yeah, I mean, he was, disciplinarian, and he, hard work, was demanded and expected, and anything less wasn't tolerated. And but he was a work hard, play hard person. And, he wanted everyone to work hard, improve, be successful, but he wanted everyone to have a good time. He wanted us to have fun.
That was true, Glenn. The way he treated us on bowl trips. I mean, that became really obvious on that. The bowl practices were hard, but he always told this story about where'd they play? They go to Cotton Bowl. Is that what it was? They went to some bowl game, and Bowden Wyatt put them in a hotel that was 40 miles out of town, and they didn't do anything. And he said that he always committed himself, that he was ever a head coach, that he was going to show his teams whatever the cities they went to had to offer, and he did that.
Yeah, and it was a reward. Bowl games were a reward for us, and he wanted us to enjoy it.
Yeah.
David mentioned later life. I got to really became closer with John because we had heart surgeries at the same time. And we went through therapy together in the same building at UT Hospital. And you really connect with someone. If you already know them, you really connect with them. And, there's a couple stories. You guys don't want to hear them. But the one thing he said to me one day, we were sitting there having coffee, and he got mad because I told him he should drink decaf coffee. And he got really mad at me. I don't even like coffee to begin with. I'm not drinking decaf. Anyway, we sat there, we're having a cup of coffee, and he said something to me really interesting. He said, one of the more difficult things for him to do was to show his players how to be a head coach, but yet care for them. It was hard for him to do because he was old school and he wanted to. He really cared for his players. He would sit and talk to me at UT Hospital, David and Glenn, and all he would talk about were past players and what they were doing in their current life. And he knew who was selling insurance. He knew who was a banker. He knew David Moon had a firm downtown. He knew Glenn Streno was with a gas company. It was amazing. And he said to me, it was really difficult when I was the head coach to show that passion and how much I cared about him. But he really cared about you guys.
Glenn, I never had a sense that, Glenn, when we were playing, I never had a sense that he did care about us.
No. he hit it well.
Yeah. And I didn't mean that as a joke. And I didn't mean it as a criticism either. I just thought of him as the head football coach. And it later became obvious to me that he cared deeply about his players, and he cared about players. And I used to hear him talk about the pain of kicking a guy off the team.
Yeah.
People who he cared for. And but I didn't know that existed when I was in school.
Yeah, he hit it. Huh?
So with that being the case, both you, David and Glenn, I mean, how did you guys develop the relationships that you had with him outside of football? Not that you disliked him when you played for him. I'm not suggesting that at all. But how did it sort of come back around full circle where there was this relationship with him and this bond that you had with him that extended beyond, I guess, player and coach and became a true friendship? How does that evolve, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, David, you need to take that one because really my relationship with Coach Majors was primarily through David and the relationship that he built through him. So I'll let you take that, David.
Brent, I don't know that I have a formula or a list of 3 things that occurred that would explain it. We just ended up being around each other, and it just kind of happened. And to be somewhat joking about it, when he came back to Tennessee, anybody remember what year? When did he leave Pitt the second time?
77.
No, 96 was his last year.
Time.
93,
Okay.
94, 95, and 96. 96 was his last season at Pitt.
So he was at Pitt through 96, and he and Mrs. Major stayed up there another year or two, and then he came back to Knoxville,
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of didn't, because of relationships and things, he was kind of a man without on an island. And I think the reason that he and I became close and we spent time together is because I invited him to my office once, and then he realized it was a place where he could come and drink free coffee and have people mail things for him. And so I think I got the fortune of becoming close to him simply because we became his office suites location by accident.
And David, he was proud to tell people he had an office downtown.
Did he really?
I'd say, Coach, what are you doing? Well, I got to go to my office downtown.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. And then he, every time he'd come to his office downtown, he'd forget which building his office was in. And so he would, we would sometimes get a call. So again, late in his life, and we would get a call from somebody on the 21st floor of the building next door, and they'd go, Coach Majors is on his way to your office. want you to know he's running a little late. You can make him run.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Carmen.
Because he chewed out the parking garage attendant because he had to pay for his parking.
You guys talk about him as kind of the person later on in life. What's it like when you walked into his arena as a young player to be a coach? I mean, to be a player, and he's your coach. What was those? We talked to some of the Pitt players. They talked about just how tough the off season was, and kind of how he went about things early in his career when he came from Iowa State to Pitt. For you guys, what was it like stepping into the arena after being recruited by him to become one of his players?
Especially for you, Glenn, being from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, being from Pittsburgh, I grew up a Pitt fan. The University of Pittsburgh is an Oakland community in Pittsburgh. And my parents were born and raised in Pittsburgh, or in the Oakland community. And, I was in a Pitt household. The year Pitt won a national championship with Coach Majors, I attended every home game. And I was a huge fan. And I remember my disappointment when he said he was leaving Pittsburgh to go to Tennessee. And so I was a big admirer, which is really the reason, when he came back, a few years later recruiting me, is why I chose to attend UT, because of Coach Majors. So I had probably a different first impression because of my childhood, and I just started playing football right around the time they won a national championship, and he was an icon in Pittsburgh. In the 70s, the Steelers won 4 Super Bowls, the Pirates won 2 World Series, and then Pitt wins the national championship, has a Heisman Trophy winner, and Coach Majors was as big a sports celebrity in Pittsburgh as Terry Bradshaw and Joe Green and Franco Harris and Willie Stargell. I mean, he was
right.
He was among all of them.
When he arrived at Pittsburgh, I was teaching at Newcastle High School, and I remember on the front page of the Post, the front page of the Post-Gazette, Glenn, was a picture of John Majors, kind of a cartoon character, a sketching, and under his arm was a book, and the book was by Norman Vincent Peale, and it said, "Enthusiasm makes the difference." And it was just kind of, they put that together, and John probably never read it. He may have, or Coach Majors, but the picture was him running as fast as he could with this book. I said, "Enthusiasm makes the difference." And in the article, I'll remember the guy's name. You will too, Glenn. I read the article, and he went on and on about the enthusiasm that this Southern guy was going to bring to Pitt football, and that it was real. I remember the guy saying, the only problem is, will we from Western Pennsylvania be able to understand his Southern drawl? But he had that book under his arm. I can remember like it was yesterday. I'm sorry.
Carter, it's funny to talk about him running around with a book. He was a lifelong reader and learner. He read the New York Times every single day, and he annotated it as he read it. And so he made notes, he highlighted, he wrote questions in the margins. And when he died on his back porch, he was out there, had a bunch of reading materials, and he had his yellow notepad where he was taking notes. And on his yellow notepad, there was a note that said, "Learn to use tablet computer, surf internet, iPad," and then it said dash, and he had written out the name of someone he was going to call to teach him these things. It says, "Call Gil Brandt." Gil Brandt was like 92 years old, and that's who he was going to get to teach him about computing. Yeah.
Where do you think the quest for learning came from for Coach Majors?
He's a teacher. I know that one. That's an easy one.
Okay.
I asked him once, Charles Davis and I were talking once about how Coach Majors had so many guys who coached for him. His coaching tree. His coaching tree is probably the largest in college football.
Jackie Sherrill talked about that.
Yeah, and I've forgotten how large it's gotten, but it's 30-something guys who he hired went on to become head NFL or college coaches. And Charles Davis and I were joking about it once about why is that? And we just figured either he was really good at recognizing talent, he was really good at developing talent, or he fired people so readily, eventually everybody worked for him. But here's what he said, Brent. I asked him, I said, why do you think you had so many assistant coaches who became head coaches? And he didn't even think about it. He didn't pause. He said, well, I'm a teacher. That's what I do. I was like my father, I'm a teacher. And I think to be a great teacher, you've got to be a great student. And that's why he was always doing that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I mean, impressive. I mean, when you think about where he came from and kind of the era and everything, for him to always continue up until his final moments on this earth to be trying to learn and to want to learn, I think is an impressive feat. Did you know that when you played for him? You mentioned that on bowl trips he would want you to see places and try to broaden your horizons. Did y'all have conversations when you were with him that were outside of football as players that were about life and about learning? Was there more to it to him than just X's and O's as players?
Yeah, you've never been in a meeting with a coach as a player, have you, Brent? No, the only discussion I ever had with him about life out of football was about whether or not I wanted to accelerate my life after football by virtue of him sitting me on a bus back to Hazel Green, Alabama, if I didn't practice harder or something. No, I never had a conversation with him about anything other than football when I was in school. Glenn, did you?
No, likewise. Yeah. He would, in group meetings, he would pass on, words of wisdom, their life lessons. I mean, he was good at that, but certainly not in a one-on-one type setting. It was more just about, he would ask about family and class and, but not much beyond that.
I find that fascinating as a part of the complexity, because he loved his players, particularly after you had stopped playing for him. He knew all about you guys. Okay, you talked to you guys, former players, about him after their playing career, and I know this is not with everybody that played for him. I'm sure there's somebody out there that didn't, quote, have a great experience, but it's almost like there's a real shift when you turn in your helmet the last time for him and kind of how the relationship evolves. And maybe I'm overstating that, but and talking to people, that's kind of what it feels like, which I think is just really interesting that it evolves the way it does when you finish playing.
Yeah, I would think it would be more of coaches in that era, as far as, having a player-coach relationship and having that distance and not, making it personal. I would think it's, I think it's certainly changed now, but that would be my guess on that is, that was just the type of coach. That's the way he was coached, and that's the way he thought it should be.
Yeah, that's a great point, Glenn. The era thing,
Post World War II.
He was the last of those icon coaches in the South. You had Suge Jordan and Vince Dooley and Coach Bryant and Coach Majors, and he was the last of that group. I think, I don't know when Pat Dye retired, but those guys were larger than life figures, and that's a little different than a lot of head coaches today, even very, very successful head coaches.
Towards the end, and David knows what I'm talking about. We did a project with him on some things, and we went through the different coaches he had. And one day I asked him, he'd come to my office a lot, and one day I asked him, I said, look at this list. Is this list really accurate? Well, he really got upset. He said, yeah. He pointed out, and he corrected me when I omitted a few people. He added them. My point is, I asked the same question you asked him, David, about, this is a very impressive list. How did you know these guys were going to be successful? And maybe you and Charles are right, maybe because he fired so many of them. But you know what he said? He said passion. He said, I knew who had passion and who didn't have passion. And I said, how'd you know that, Coach? He said, you can feel it. You can just feel it. He said, when I interviewed Jackie Sherrill, Jimmy Johnson, he went through a whole list. I could feel their passion. He said, because their passion was the same passion as I had.
The passion of the guys on that coaching tree list, it went both ways. After his death, after Coach Major's death, someone published a list of the coaching tree, and I got a text message from someone I'd never met, and it was Gene Chizik. And he said, I'm on that list. I need to be on, you left me out. Somebody left me off the list.
Right.
And we went back, and sure enough, there's Gene Chizik in the 1992 Prescott or whatever year it was.
He came, I'll tell you exactly when it was. He came in the spring of 1990. He's in the 90 Prescott, and then he left, and Coach Majors hired Steve Caldwell to take his place. And Gene Chizik left. You're right. He's in the program, 1990 program. Good call.
Yeah, he wanted to be sure he was on the list.
That's beautiful. It really is beautiful. The other thing is, Andy Kelly said something to me going way back to the last 15, 20 minutes you guys have been talking. I'm going back there. Andy Kelly said something to me. I remember one day he said, I didn't understand everything you guys are saying. He said, I didn't understand Coach Majors until I left, until I was gone. And I looked back on my 4 or 5 years there playing quarterback for him. And then I really realized who Coach Majors was. I thought that was interesting. So that's basically everything you guys are saying. And,
there's probably another aspect of that thing that Andy said, and that is it's not only about leaving, and it's not only about being able to see it with some distance, but it's also about, at 28 years old, you're a little more mature. At 30 years old, once you have kids, it becomes a little easier to maybe understand some of the things he did, and some, I think it just takes a little maturity to fully appreciate it.
So how would you rate his influence on your life?
It's probably immeasurable, especially at the age, Dave and I both, left home, as a teenager, and, at those college years, you go from a kid, a knucklehead teenager, and start growing into an adult. And, that's the, formidable time then. And, the lessons, the discipline required, and the hard work, and, everything associated with what Coach Majors taught is something that, sticks with all of us, I know. And so it's really immeasurable.
Yeah, the best example of his influence in my life I can give you is when I hear one of my children who were born 8 years after he left Tennessee, so my kids never knew him as a coach, and I hear my kids repeat things that he said at practice or in meetings that they've only heard from me and my friends. They've heard Glenn say things. I heard my kids were in a play once, and one of their castmates made some comment about, practice makes perfect. And my son jumped up immediately and said, no, perfect practice makes perfect.
One other thing, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this. after our interviews with the two kids not kids, again, they're older than you guys, from Pitt and Jackie Sherrill, we brought up the relationship John had with Tim Karen. You can't have a relationship like that today. College athletics is not structured that way. The trainer reports to someone above him, and someone above him reports to someone above him. Whereas basically John Majors reported to Tim Karen in a funny way, and vice versa. And that relationship, John and Dave from Pitt talked about it, and so did Jackie Sherrill, about that relationship, how unique it was. And I want you guys to talk a little bit about that, because both those guys, I'm sure, has impact on your life equally.
I'll say this, we could talk about Tim for a couple of hours as well. But you may not, college athletics may not lend itself to reporting relationships like that anymore, but every successful person has one or more people on whom they can fully rely, somebody who is a complete confidant. And it doesn't matter whether the person is in their direct reporting structure or not. And that's what Tim was to Coach Majors, is that Tim was the one guy who could go to Coach Majors and say, hey, you can't do that. Or, and he would, I'm sure he would never do that in front of anybody, but a person can't be successful without someone who'll be truthful with him about everything. And I promise you, somebody at the University of Alabama goes in and closes the door with Nick Saban and throws the bullcrap flag when they think it's necessary.
Yeah, you may be right about that. We haven't experienced that in a long time here. So that's a good point, because there's so much transition going on in college athletics. People move a lot, and it's difficult. You can't bring your trainer anymore. You can't do that. You go to take a job, and in most cases, you go and you accept what they have there. John was able to bring Tim from Pitt with a 4-year relationship, and it just grew and grew and grew. And those guys in Pitt, they referred to Tim as the big guy. If you want something done, you went to the big guy. Anyway,
Josh Heupel has 8 employees who do what Tim Karen did.
yeah, that's right.
And that's the way it is in college athletics. I mean, in the modern day, it's you got to have an assistant to everything. Whereas, and I think that's a different element to the era that we're talking about, and I think that's where Coach Majors was unique. I mean, his tree it's amazing. His tree is that big when you consider the staff size that they had compared to what it is now. And when you look at it, I mean, he was immersed in everything as a head coach. Glenn, he didn't get he might have got a daily report, but he knew what was going to be on that report before he got the daily report, because he had his fingerprints on everything within the program, which is unique to that era. And I think that lends to you guys as players for him, having the influence that he had on you, not just when you played, but for later on in life, because it was so much more hands-on. If you had an issue, he was going to come, you had to go see him about it. You didn't necessarily go through 4 levels before you ever got to him, because it was just different back then.
Yeah, but I think that ties directly to what Carmen is talking about, the relationship with Tim Karen, because that was a direct link, because Tim knew everything. And that's how Coach Majors knew everything. Tim was that link, and he would inform Coach Majors and advise Coach Majors, and I'm sure sometimes didn't inform Coach Majors when he thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, it was a unique relationship. I can recall one day sitting with a couple of guys, and Tim was one of them. We were doing something, I don't know what it was. It was down the old training room, down there by the equipment room, the old Stokely. And we were sitting in the room, and all of a sudden Tim jumped up. And we all looked at him and said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Coach Major's in the building." And I don't know if it was Bill Higdon or Doug Matthews. Someone said, No. He's out of town. He's not coming back till tomorrow. Tim said, "No, he's in the building right now." Tim got up and walked out, and sure enough, there was Coach Majors in the building. I'm not making that up. Believe me. I looked at those guys and said, "Wow, what is this?" Yeah.
Guys, listen, it's been a blast catching up with you guys and talking to you about Coach Majors and the complexity that makes him an iconic figure. I know they're unveiling a statue at Pittsburgh this week in front of the Johnny Majors Classic between Tennessee and Pitt, and I know how important that would be for him. I know how important Tennessee was for him, and most importantly, I know how important his players were for him. So thank you for spending some time with us and sharing some stories about playing for him, getting to know him later on in life, and about the complexity of a man who a lot of people probably on the surface think is more of a simple guy than what he really is, David.
Yeah, there was John Majors, Johnny Majors, and Coach Majors, and they were three totally different people.
Yeah, and drum majors.
I never knew drum majors.
They used to sign his stuff, drum majors.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the ball game this weekend, and we'll catch up to you soon, okay?
I appreciate you guys doing this. I really do. This has really been a nice moment to reminisce.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Carmen.
thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.